meeting of council on June 9th, 2026. Welcome everyone here today and those watching on YouTube. In this first part of the agenda, we're meeting as council for urgent matters or routine items that typically do not require as much discussion. The decisions council makes in this portion of the meeting are final. If anyone in the community has questions about the final decisions made tonight, please reach out to staff. I'll start with roll call of council. I'm Mayor Shantz. I'm chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant. Oh, you're muted. She's here. And Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. We also need to reconvene an open session. Do we have a motion to reconvene? Councillor Grant and Councillor Burgess, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. June, it's almost summer. We have two important days coming up. We have Indigenous Community Engagement Day. June is National Indigenous History Month, and so tomorrow at the Woolwich Memorial Centre, there is a drop-in. Sorry, I didn't get the times on that. Is it from 9 till 4? 9:30 till 3:30, thank you. And you can engage with the Indigenous community there and see some of the displays and some of the activities that they're doing there. And this coming Saturday, June 13th, is our Woolwich Pride event at Gibson Park, and that's from 1 until 4 this Saturday. So lots going on this week. Let's start with a moment of silence. Thank you. The Township of Woolwich acknowledges with deep respect that the land we call home has existed since time immemorial, long before our communities were formed and long before we arrived here. Indigenous peoples have had a deep and lasting relationship with this land, caring for it, learning from it, and living alongside all it sustains. We are grateful to the First Peoples who have lived on and cared for this land and who continue to do so today. In particular, we recognize the Chinatan, also known as the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people. We honor their deep connection to this land, and we acknowledge their wisdom, resilience, and leadership. These communities have protected and cared for the land with respect, responsibility, and a sense of shared trust. As we move forward, we hope to build a future based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and stronger relationships with one another. May we continue to learn together, to care for each other, and to honor all who share this place with us. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, there are no items to come forward from closed and no public meeting. We do have one delegation and one presentation this evening. So for our delegate, your time limit is posted on the agenda. There will be a timer on the screen, and you'll hear a warning sound when there's 1 minute left. And then again when your time is up. So once you're finished, you can return to your seat and stay if you like, or leave. So go ahead. We have Kyle Huff. Welcome.
Sorry, just trying to get the slideshow to work here.
Just give us 1 second. We're pulling it up for you.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
That won't count towards your time.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Thank you for your opportunity, or for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today as a resident of the St. Jacobs area to speak about concerns related to the train whistle at the King Street crossing. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that many people value the railway, its history, and the role it plays in the character and tourism in St. Jacobs. We appreciate that as well, and this is not about opposing the train itself. Our concern is specifically related to the intensity, timing, frequency, and impact of the whistle noise within an increasingly residential area. We also understand that trains are currently required to whistle at crossings under federal railway safety regulations, and we appreciate that safety must remain the priority. This is not simply a noise issue, it is also a safety and livability issue in a growing community. Sorry. Next slide. Train traffic itself is not consistent. However, when trains do pass through the crossing, the whistle is required to sound multiple times on each approach. The result is very loud, high-intensity warning signals that carries throughout the surrounding residential area. During peak periods such as market days, St. Jacobs Sparkles, and the Christmas train, residents experience this more frequently, often extending further into the evening and overnight. While train traffic is not constant, the timing of train movements can be particularly disruptive. Overnight whistle activity can wake nearby residents and interrupt sleep, even when train traffic is otherwise relatively limited. For many residences, the concern is less about the number of trains and more about the intensity of the whistle and the timing at which it occurs. We have also heard that other nearby households experiencing similar concerns, so it is clear that it's not isolated to one property or one family. Next slide there. There are many families with young children living directly along this corridor. With nearby families, particularly those with young children, the intensity of the whistle affects both the enjoyment of outdoor spaces and, in some cases, the ability of nearby residences to sleep uninterrupted when trains pass overnight. In addition, the King Street corridor transitions from 80 kilometers an hour to 50 kilometers an hour directly at this crossing. At this location, there is a speed transition, a rail crossing, pedestrian activity, and a high-intensity warning signal occurring at the same point. While the whistle is intended as a safety measure, the current setup can also create a stressful and inconsistent environment for drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, and many nearby residences. This area is no longer, next slide there, yeah. This area is no longer the same low-density environment that existed when many of these practices were originally established. St. Jacobs continues to experience residential growth throughout multiple approved, active, and proposed developments, including a proposed 29-unit household development on Printry Road. Next slide. Multiple proposed residential developments in the Hawksville Road and Northside Drive area, representing hundreds of potential future household units. Ongoing build out within the Bromberg St. Jacobs Trail Estates subdivision near Highway 85. Sorry, a couple more slides there. Additional residential developments approved as the Old Scout Place area. Collectively, these developments represent a continuing increase in residential density within and around St. Jacobs. If this issue is noticeable today, it will likely become more significant as the community continues to grow. We understand that whistle cessation involves a formal review process, coordination with the railway and regulators, and potential infrastructure and safety requirements. We also understand that the township has previously reviewed whistle cessation procedures and related requirements. Many communities have implemented whistle cessation while crossings are equipped with infrastructure such as gates, lights, and bells that continue to prioritize public safety. We are respectfully asking Council to support pursuing whistle cessation at the King Street crossing, direct regional staff to begin discussions with the railway and appropriate regulators regarding feasibility and requiring crossing upgrades, and explore what steps may be required to safely move this process forward in the future. St. Jacobs continues to grow, and the impact of repeated whistle noise within St. Jacobs areas is becoming more difficult for some nearby families. We believe exploring modern crossing infrastructure can continue to protect public safety while reducing the impact on nearby residences. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Huff? Councillor Bryant?
Thank you. Have you made a presentation to the region about this issue?
We have not, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schwinter?
Just curious, can you expand on what time that train crosses and when you're hearing the whistles? I think it's a late night one that's probably most problematic.
Yeah, so during the day, on market days, just to expand on that too, it comes roughly like 4 times, I think, is what the market kind of schedule is, like during regular times. So even 4 times, if that's actually the train going like out and back, so that's actually 8 times it crosses over King Street. And then during the night, roughly, it's about 3 or 4 times a week, and that ranges from between midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning. Doing a little bit of research on it, I wasn't able to find what the schedule was for the freight trains, though.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you again.
I
Councillor,
guess following that, I think that it is time for us as a council to start that conversation again about what's appropriate crossings in St. Jacobs. King Street's definitely getting busier and busier all the time. The last time we investigated, I think we weren't quite at the threshold of requiring crossing gate guards or gates. But these new subdivisions coming on, I think we will be. So now's the time to start that conversation. I think have staff interact with the region, the railways to figure out the process and what is appropriate in the situation. So I've got a proposed motion in the package that's basically saying we as a council endorse improving the safety features at this crossing, subject to understanding the budget and regulatory approvals. We need to be engaged with that throughout the process, and asking staff to work with the region and railways to see what the next steps are and report back by the end of the year. So I'd make that motion.
okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Cadeau. Councillor Grant, you have your hand up. Was that a question for the delegate or?
No, I had a question for staff.
Okay, go ahead.
I've had a resident in Breslau ask about whistle cessation a couple of years ago, and I'm just wondering if Director Poupet can remind me what happens to the liability when we cease a whistle at a train crossing, and does that liability change if we add, rails or gates to prevent crossing?
Yeah, to Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Grant. So the report that IS wrote in 2020 was as a result of a number of inquiries over time, and it was felt that we needed to look at this more substantively. And essentially what this is a risk and liability piece. Obviously, train whistles are required for safety. And in this particular instance, it's a little more complicated as the township is not the road authority at this particular crossing in St. Jacobs. But in Breslau, it is a Metrolinx line. CN does have infrastructure, and that is all township as the road authority. In that instance, it would just shift liability. So all costs associated with any requirements to permit whistle cessation, such as gate arms, signalization, and the like, would be borne by the Township of Woolwich forever and a day. And then the other issue would be with respect to insurance liability. Currently, under the insurance pool, municipalities have 50 million. That could not be enough in certain circumstances, depending on what freight is being run on that line, and the township may require additional insurance coverage for various crossings. I think that could change, so I don't want to speculate that that is a blanket statement across every rail location, but that certainly was the response by our insurance pool when we investigated the Metrolinx line in Breslau. So I think here, it's not just the King Street crossing, appreciating that if whistle cessation was to occur here, you would need the region's buy-in as the road authority. The township would likely have to absorb all the costs associated with that crossing, and would have to meet some standards. But the more complicated piece I would suggest here is is that you've also got 7 other locations within less than 6 kilometers. So that would mean you'd probably want to look at not this crossing. Even if you did whistle cessation at one crossing, you're likely going to hear whistles all along. It starts at Farmers Market Road, crosses King Street 3 times, as well as Hawksville Road and Henry Street in St. Jacobs. So there's a number of crossing locations to be reviewed for to kind of address whistle cessation in the St. Jacobs settlement.
But if we are just looking at that one crossing, you said that there would be costs for the township, or did you mean the region?
In our conversations thus far, all township costs associated with whistle cessation, all the locations are considered safe. Whistling is how that's made safe. There are no improvements required by the road authorities currently. If we want to seek whistle cessation, that would be at the township's request to the region to seek that whistle cessation. And then we would be required to go through a process to determine if it's appropriate. And that would involve regional approval, as well as, in this case, CN approval, as they have running rights over the rail line.
But the region wouldn't pay for it?
No, because they don't require it. And we hold the noise bylaw as well. So that's part of why we would need to advocate. It's not the regional noise bylaw, it's a township noise bylaw that we would be looking to amend essentially here.
And if we're doing it for road safety?
It's the regional corridor and they deem it to be safe.
They deemed to be safe under previous traffic studies. I'm wondering if traffic studies are changing that over time with the increase. I'm also curious if signals and traffic guards are deemed to be safer than strictly whistles and would actually decrease liability for the township.
And again, I'm not going to profess my expertise, so through you, Mayor Schatz, to Councillor Schwint. For us to fully explore this option, we would require expertise in the form of engineering services of some form. That just is not in the work plan currently. We don't have funding associated with that. So that would be one ask of council. If we were to move forward with this, we would require that expertise. It is my current understanding in the preliminary conversations that any alterations that we would like to see on a regional corridor to support whistle cessation would be borne by us, as they consider all the crossings currently in a state of safe repair. There is nothing that they require to upgrade currently per the Canadian Transportation Association standards and those guidelines. So everything is currently in a state of repair and good working order and safe crossing. But again, the whistle cessation component requires different alterations to the crossings, which would be borne by us, and then likely liability shared with us, and could have a wide range of costs in the hundreds of thousands for sure. And likely to address all of the crossings, we'd be talking to the millions likely.
Other questions? Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, just want to get clarity on the motion here, Councillor Schwint. When you talk about in step 2 there, complete the necessary improvements before December 31st, 2026, are you addressing just the reaching out, or are you saying actually have stuff built and all that?
No, I'm asking for staff report back on what's required, some budget estimations, that type of thing. No, I'm not expecting,
Yeah,
because we have to give council approval to spend money and we don't know what we're spending.
for sure. And just one more thing on it. We're learning a lot tonight on it, and I fully support this request and wanting to get a solution for them. But are we jumping the gun with number 1? Like, we're learning a lot tonight. Should we just kind of have number 2 there as a motion that we're directing staff to find a solution for us and bring it back before we fully endorse all the changes?
I think we're hearing with the residents tonight, and the letters attached that getting rid of the whistle is their number 1 goal. So to do that, we have to increase safety features. I think I'm open, and the motion is open to what those features may be, not part of the staff report, but we endorse improvements if it's feasible within the budget.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, through you, Mayor, just kind of offering a hot take here. It's 2026. Surely there are other ways to ensure rail safety than a blaring whistle in the middle of the night. I know that if it was Elmira and cars were honking horns, Councillor Burgess and I would have our inbox blow up and bylaw would be dispatched. This is a quality of life issue. And so if it costs us money, I think that it's worth at least exploring so that we can ensure that quality of life piece.
Anything else? Okay, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I would support the second section of this. The first one I'm a little leery of because it's basically saying we're going to go ahead and look at whistle cessation, but I think I would like more information from staff before we were to move forward with any direction as to how to proceed. I think we need more information on this before we make any decisions, because it could be, as Jared has said, a very costly item to enforce. So I want more information.
Councillor Cadell.
Sorry, great point, and I'll just weigh in on that. I'm comfortable with it because it's subjected to budget confirmation and approval. And much to Councillor Schwint's point, we're hearing from residents that it's the whistle that's concerning. If we can add safety measures and get rid of the whistle, great, but the whistle is what's concerning. And so I think that we really do need to address that within the budget constraints, which the motion speaks to. So I'm comfortable with the language.
Yeah, I don't think we have it. Just my take, I don't think we have any control over the whistle. That's all the railway regulations. So without the gates, I don't think we have any hope of getting the whistle stopped. But Mr. Poupé, in terms of producing a report like this, can you give us a good, I guess the deadline is December 31st is what you're asking for?
I asked for that, but I'm willing to work with staff what's appropriate.
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to council, I guess as, so I don't know, I haven't looked into the details. This is an expertise that we do not have, obviously, and it is a very specialized knowledge as well. I guess I'd look for a couple pieces of direction from council. One, obviously to direct staff to engage. We could do this through simply reaching out to some firms. We have retained some firms in the past as requirements to review crossings. We could simply ask what they think an estimate might be. We would seek direction from council on what we were going to review. We only have 18 crossings in Woolwich. We appreciate we have received whistle cessation requests from other community members. We just happen to have St. Jacobs before us tonight. But is that something that council would direct that we would review all 18? It might be more advantageous to look at it together. There might be some cost efficiencies potentially there too. And then we could have a fulsome update to our 2021 staff report. I would hesitate to guarantee. I would prefer to maybe report back potentially as early as next week with maybe a bit of a schedule and approximate cost for engineering review, but would look for some direction from council if we're going to look at all 18 and try to get that done before the end of the year.
I'll look to Councillor Schwint. It's your motion.
I guess I'm torn on this because yes, there's efficiency to scale normally, but are we just expanding the problem too much? If we look at one particular crossing, can it then be a model going forward? Or do we look at two different crossings, one at King Street and one smaller residential one, and use them as models that we can project over time? I see two areas in township. There's St. Jacobs, there's a bunch of crossings, and there's Breslaw. We know there's a GO station planned in Breslaw, and I've got to think that as the GO station is built, there's going to be a whole bunch of necessary improvements along that corridor. And it makes sense to deal with all those in one fell swoop to speed up the GO trains, make the whole line safer. And then we've got St. Jacobs as a smaller, very much a spur line, which is 4 tourist trains a day plus a freight train 3 or 4 times a week, which is totally different. So I'd almost say start small and expand from there.
So you're thinking just this one crossing?
Do one from now and then learn from it.
Okay. Kayla, Councillor Grant, sorry.
That's okay. I hear what Councillor Schwint is saying about starting small. However, I feel that we investigate one whistle cessation at one crossing and you're going to open a can of worms and have other requests resurface. I don't know if those requests will feel the need to wait for improvements along the Breslaw line for the GO station. I think they would see a cessation in St. Jacobs and start to ask for those improvements done already at their crossing, especially as, you know, I have residents asking as far back as 2024 and 2025 So I would support looking at all 18. I think it makes sense.
There's a motion on the floor that speaks to St. Jacobs specifically. The direction to staff in the motion is just St. Jacobs. Councillor Cadeau.
I hear what Councillor Grant's saying, and yes, we've had residents in Elmira voice their concerns about the whistle for our line as well. But I think that there is an argument to be made about just figuring this out before we go at scale. And so if we can figure out that, hey, it's $20,000 to do this one in St. Jacobs, then we can take that information and make decisions on the other 17. Because maybe we don't move forward with St. Jacobs. Maybe we determine to be outside of our budget capacity, and do we really need to examine the other 17 if we make that determination? I think not, and so I'll just leave it at that.
So Mr. Poupey has heard our discussion. Another option for council could be to defer this to the next meeting and to give Jared time to look into what an investigation might look like. Councillor Brunt.
Thank you. I know this came up in 2009, and I believe it came up again in the 2015, 2016, somewhere in those timeframes. Do we have any way of getting information as to what happened or the outcome of those requests at that point in time? Because if it's come back that it couldn't be done, for example, for financial reasons or the safety reasons, whatever the case may be, it might give us a little more information to work with as well if we know the results of the previous investigations.
Is there anyone here, Mr. Poupey? Do you have any idea what those costs look like?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Bryant. So our 2021 report would be the most current. To my knowledge, nothing proceeded with respect to whistle cessation, cost prohibitive. The risk and liability that was placed on the township were the reasons. I'm going to hazard a guess here. So one thing I should clarify, every location site specific. I want to be clear, there's no paintbrush with respect to whistle cessation. There's a lot of pieces that need to be looked at. I know enough to be dangerous, and that's one of the pieces for sure. Every location needs to be reviewed independently. But the costs were anywhere between $400,000 to $600,000 per location potentially. So just to give a magnitude of some of what we're thinking, and then adding risk and liability on top of that. But again, I think let's hear that from some expertise and see what that looks like in St. Jacobs, if that's the will of council. We can certainly focus in on, and I'm going to ask for a broader net than just King Street, because I think if you did proceed with whistle cessation in King Street, we are only going to have whistling at other spots. Let's not forget that it is the cheapest health and safety from the rails perspective. So I don't see them ever initiating whistle cessation. It is always at the behest of a municipality. Hitting that horn is how they keep the rail safe. And a whistle cessation also means that it doesn't mean you'll never get a horn. There are reasons to blow a horn, right? So we understand this as well, that it's not that you'll never get whistling. So I just think it would be wise to sort of look at that St. Jacobs area, sort of from Farmers Market up to King Street North, the north end, if we could at least encapsulate that in the review from a whistle cessation perspective, because I suspect if you blow in on Farmers Market, you will still hear it in St. Jacobs proper, likely. I certainly can attest I can hear the whistle at night as well.
Yeah, I can hear 3 of them at night. Councillor Cadeau.
$500,000 for one of these crossings, or is it made out of like solid gold? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, those are costs with the arms, the rail arms, the power that needs to be associated. A lot of these are rural locations. There's a whole host of pieces that need to be upgraded and so forth. So these are not cheap, and hence why there hasn't been a lot of whistle cessation likely moved on in Woolwich particularly. Appreciate other municipalities have, but likely programs. Maybe there's multiple funding partners associated with that too. In this instance, this would be likely all of Woolwich's costs associated. And that is just the initial install, and then obviously there's the ongoing maintenance obligations to whistle cessation. But I think to explore that through professional services would be the right way to do it, and we could be at least speaking real dollars in today's day and age right now.
Anything else? Councillor Bryant?
Can we defer this to our next meeting so we can get this information before we make a decision?
Mr. Poupey, if we defer it till the next meeting, would you be able to give us a little better idea of the cost of even doing this study? And
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Shantz, Councillor Bryant, so what I will attempt to do is at least make contact, whether through a rail lawyer or engineering firm of some form to put us in touch with somebody and get a ballpark, and I can at least provide that maybe in verbal form for next week. That'll be my goal to do that for our next meeting.
and maybe include the most recent study?
So the only thing was we have a staff report. I don't know that the studies proceeded. I think it was the staff report that I was referring to. So I can look to see if we can find the 2009-2015, I believe you said, Councillor Bryant. So we can see if we can find something on file related to that.
I know there's been one done in the last
Okay.
10 years
Okay.
for sure. And
2009 was actually referenced in the paper, so I can say that is one date for sure. They
It-
mentioned Mark Bowman as well.
It may be irrelevant because the grade crossing standards have changed since like 2019, I believe, is the latest. So it may not have any bearing. We may just need to rely on the new standard.
okay, is there a seconder for a motion to defer, Councillor Grant? Any discussion on the motion to defer time and place? We said 2 weeks, so which is 2 weeks unless we do a special council. So yeah, okay. Call a question on the deferral. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so 2 weeks we'll hear from Mr. Poupey again on some of the details that we've talked about, and then we'll decide where to go from there. Okay, thanks. Okay, Development Charges Reduction Program. Director of Financial Services, Colin Lynn, and Senior Financial Analyst, Jennifer Shamsun. Got it. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, through you to council. I was just getting all the technology teed up here. We're here to present the Development Charge Reduction Program. So just to give you an overview of this, we want to outline some of the implications of participation of the Development Charge Reduction Program. It was recently announced by the province on June 1st, and there's a very short application timeline of June 19th. So we have to make a decision very quickly. Most municipalities in the province are also tackling this very tight timeline. So understanding that you may not have all the information in front of you right now to make a decision, we're also learning about this program as we go. So we'll be able to provide more information potentially over the next few weeks, but also understanding that June 19th deadline is fast approaching. So council may want to consider a special council meeting to discuss this further before we actually decide to opt in. So the decision we're looking at is whether to submit an application under the June 2026 intake. So just to provide a little bit of additional context, development charges are a key funding source for growth-related infrastructure. There is a push around the province to address the housing crisis right now. So the intent of the program is to reduce the development charges, which are embedded in the cost of new home builds. So from a local context, our water and wastewater DC reserves are already constrained, which is a major component of this. So we need to provide infrastructure investment to support continued growth in the township. So that's usually funded through development charges. So a reduction in development charges would reduce the amount of revenue that's available. So participation in the Development Charge Reduction Program would impact both the timing of revenue collection, and we would have to adjust our funding approach for existing capital projects. So as we've been talking about over the last 6 months to a year, the township has continued to grow and enhance its long-term financial planning capacity. This kind of dovetails very much into our budget development work, the journey that we're on to improve our long-term financial picture. But there's still a lot of uncertainty right now about our eligible costs and our financial picture. So We hope to have a lot more of this in place for budget 2027. Unfortunately, the timing for this with the June 19th application makes some of this analysis much more difficulty. The water capacity issue that the region is undergoing is another layer of uncertainty around this and how those growth potential delays could impact the DC revenues. Generally, our DCs are lower. Just for context, our DCs are generally lower than a lot of the larger centers in the greater Toronto Hamilton area. So the target for the legislation for those larger centers, they have much higher DCs, so they have much more capacity to reduce the DCs than our local DCs. So getting a little bit more into the specifics of the program. So there was a high-level announcement. You may recall this is a joint thing from the Ontario government and the federal government. The intention is to reduce the cost of new housing by reducing the cost of development charges, and it's going to be offset by that provincial and federal funding. So this was a 10-year cost-shared funding program. I believe it was about $8.8 billion was announced. So the idea is for lower upfront housing and to accelerate construction to spur new home prices. And this is in conjunction with the HST rebate that was already announced. The funding is designed to offset some DC impacts of the reduced DC revenue, but the province and the federal government has been fairly clear that they do expect municipalities to contribute a certain component. So likely we wouldn't be made whole through applying for this program. So there is a shared funding agreement of up to 90% of eligible project costs from the provincial government, and at least 10% we would have to kick in our share. So we kick in 10%, the federal and provincial governments provide 90%, and the other side of that is we're required to pledge to reduce our DCs by at least 30% and up to 50%. So the focus is on housing enabling services, potentially roads, water, and sewer. So we have to submit project lists, and they have to be shovel ready, so essentially ready to go. Already done the detailed design phase and those other phases to be included in the submission. We also have to report on a number of items and how many homes that could potentially be constructed. So that'll be considered in our application. Again, the water supply issue kind of makes that a little bit more difficult to really understand how much homes will be built in the short term. And then there's also the municipal financial contribution. We would have to find the 10% in addition to the reduction of DC revenues. So probably the best way to think about this is 1 or 2 large projects would receive 90% funding. And on the flip side, we would have to do an analysis of how much we would lose in revenue from collecting DCs from all of our other housing projects on the go. So there would be a considerable analysis to understand that. But one of the things for Woolwich specifically is our DCs, in a particular water wastewater, are already in a deficit position. So further constraining our DC revenues would put us at higher financial risk. We would have to be certain that any potential funding or any application would be offset potentially in the lost revenue that we would receive, because we wouldn't want to get into a worse financial picture. But it would increase our reliance on non-DC portions of funding. So say that 10% would potentially have to come from either user rates or from the property tax base. We did receive confirmation, at least this is in flux, but our latest information is we couldn't use DC funding for the 10%, so that would have to come on the backs of the tax or the user fee rates. So at this point, just as I said, this is the information and the clarity around this program is coming fast and furious. Over the last 2 days, we've learned more probably in the last week, and new elements of this program are still being understood. So we have 2 real options. So option 1 is to apply to this program. So we would have to have shovel-ready projects and accept that potentially we would reduce our development charges by 30 to 50%. We would have reduced DC revenue potentially for 3 years, And we would also have to figure out where the 10% municipal contribution would be required. There's other financial options, debt funding or other potential funding. So one thing to be clear too is it's an application-based program, so there's no guarantee we would actually be successful in our application. But an important thing to realize, if we're not successful, then we wouldn't be committed to that DC reduction. It's only if we're successful do we have to go through this program. But we would have to still commit, if we did accept the program, to reduce it as a condition of accepting that fund. The other option would be to not apply. We're not really sure if there's going to be a future intake. The latest we've heard that this is the only intake, but again, this is an evolving program, so there may be a future intake process, but we're not really sure whether or not that is. So we could continue with our existing DC framework and capital planning. We're still maturing, and we would have more time to integrate the DC study and the work that we're already doing into our capital plan, and a lot more budgeting. We'd have a better idea of our financial picture. That would also help us. We wouldn't change our DC rate structure, so there'd be less uncertainty and less risk around that. We understand kind of our current situation. But however, we may lose future funding that may be tied to this intake. So it is potential that the province could say, if you don't apply for this stream, you may not be eligible for other funding streams down the road. That is a risk. But there could also be from the development community that we are not doing our part to reduce the cost of home building. So there are other non-financial considerations at play too, and other stakeholders that are invested in this program. So we don't know if there'll be future funding opportunities, but essentially that's what we know to date for the program. And we're just looking for a little bit of discussion, some feedback, council's thoughts on the current program. And we could potentially come back to council as we learn more information. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Council, questions, discussion, Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, I'll get us started off with the water situation that you referenced. Is there an assumption that the funding will be only if we meet certain housing targets? And are we going to be limited in our ability to hit those targets because of the water constraints?
Through you, Mayor Shawns, to Councillor Cadeau, they do ask for housing numbers, so I would assume that the intent is to provide support and to make sure that we have those housing numbers. There hasn't been any clarity around targets related to something like the HAF funding or the Housing Accelerator funding. The reason is, like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty around the water supply issue. So our ability to meet those targets aren't necessarily our own. We're under at the mercy of the region as well. So I would hope that the province would take that into account when we're submitting our application, but I don't know for certain about whether or not they would claw it back or anything.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Just a comment. I find it concerning that they have thrown this at us in such a short timeline. It's giving us no time to think things through or really get our ducks in a row as to what we have as far as financial ability to participate in this. And the other thing I find concerning is the fact if we don't have the money, our taxpayers are going to be on the hook for some of this, which means increased property taxes. And I find that a little concerning as well. I don't think it's fair to the public to be hit with tax increases because the government just wants to cut cost of housing. Excuse me. There should be a direct way they can work with the developers to do that without coming through the municipalities. And I'm a little concerned with their process.
Councillor Schwint.
I want to follow up on that because that's a huge concern for all of us. First question would be, let's say we get ambitious to go ahead and say we'll do a 35% decrease in our DCs. And we've budgeted 305 units per year for the next 3 years. What would the net costs in foregone DCs be?
Through you, Mayor Shawns, to Councillor Schwind, I believe it would be again, we're still working on some of the financial analysis, but around the 5 million loss amount, 5 million total of lost DC revenue. Again, that's based on 305 units, which is what we have in our DC study. Again, to Councillor Cadeau's point, it's probably unlikely that we would have that many units because of the water supply constraint, which may delay development, but kind of at an upset limit, it would probably be around, I believe it's around 5.7 million.
And what's our current projected shortfall in the DC funds?
Through you, Mayor Jones, could you just like clarify the question?
We're projecting $150 million in projects over the next 10 years, picking a number, and we think we've got funding coming in of 50 million, so we're short about 100 or?
Yeah, through your Mayor Shawns to Councillor Schwinn. I understand the question. So essentially the total cost of our DC study, if you add up all of our capital projects, I believe it was around 330 million that we would need to fund. And that's assuming that we would do all of those projects in our 10-year time horizon. Lots of different funding ways we could do that through debt or other ways. The amount I believe we estimated for DC revenue was 88 million. So there would be a shortfall of at least 200 and something million. I believe we had maybe 35 million for grants, but it would be around the $200 million ballpark of deficits of DC revenue to capital costs. Again, some of this needs to be kind of refined, but that was in our current DC study.
Yeah. So I guess where I was going with that is I'm really conscious of ratepayers having to pay everything too, Councillor Bryant, but I think ratepayers are going to be on the hook no matter what we do here, because we've got capital projects that are going to happen, not $350 million worth, but a lot. DCs won't cover it all. And the only other source of revenue, if Fed and provinces don't come through, is ratepayer. So right now, this is the only game in town to get some of that Fed Prov money. And to me, we need to make a business case to get as much of that as we can to make sure that it's justifying any decrease we potentially make. And if it doesn't, then we don't go ahead. But to not do the homework now, I think does not serve our ratepayers well.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I respect your points. I guess my concern is we can't even do homework because they haven't announced those details. And so I don't have any interest in signing Woolwich up for this program. It's going to reduce their development charges, revenue. And it's especially been clear from the province that we're not going to be made whole. So my fear is that without that commitment that's firm from the province, much to the comments that have already been made, it's going to fall on current ratepayers. And 10% is the minimum. If we want to be competitive, we're going to have to go a lot higher than 10%, I would think. And so that can't be DC funded. It's going to be from current ratepayers, which isn't growth paying for growth anymore. So, I mean, I don't think Woolwich should volunteer until the province is prepared to provide more details around the program.
Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Cadeau was saying. He's making some good points there. And I just want to touch on some more of the funding issues. So our last DC study was 2 years ago. And I think since then we've already kind of updated some numbers, and some of it was underestimated or there's been more inflation. So I just wanted to clarify, is there any way we can use current numbers for the projects the government will be funding to allow us to get actual 90% versus 90% from a few years ago? Or is there inflation that we can get some more over the years, or kind of how is that determined and to truly be made whole, not based on a few years ago?
Through you, Mayor Shawns to Councillor Burgess. So this is again one of the nuances in the program that has even changed as we started looking at that and preparing this presentation. From what we understand, again, this is all subject to change, but from looking at the guidelines of the grant program, it needs to be identified, the cost needs to be identified in your DC study for the DC recoverable amount. And they are allowing, because we did it in 2024, they are allowing a certain amount for indexing or inflation. Again, they're not clear on what inflation number they're using, something I'm sure close to what we already index our DCs from. But for example, we could have a number of projects that were listed at $5 million, but with recent costing, that could be $10 million. From our understanding, we would be constrained to that cost that's listed in our DC study. So if we did go out to tender then and the project was $10 million, that our local share wouldn't be 10%. In this example, it would be closer to 60% because the province and the federal government would only fund what was in our DC study. We would be responsible for the overage. So that is another financial risk and uncertainty around this program. But our understanding is they wouldn't allow for new costing to be submitted, at least at this point.
Councillor Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate staff bringing this to our attention and facilitating this conversation. I agree with many of the points made. I think the lack of clarity from the province is a big issue, and especially as we have the compounding issue of not knowing if there's hard housing targets we have to reach with a water capacity issue. I just can't get behind supporting applying for this at this point. I think it has a lot of high financial risk and a lot of questions that we would need answers before I'd be comfortable to apply to it.
Mr. Lynn, if we deferred this for a week and had a special council in a week, would you expect that you could have at least a little more clarity for us to make a final decision?
Through you, Mayor Johnson, to Councillor Grant's point, that's part of the reason we're coming in front of you, just because we have a council meeting tonight and we are aware of this program, but we didn't have a staff report or a recommendation for council. We wanted to ask for council's general input, but we could provide a staff report with a little bit more information. Hopefully we get a little bit more clarity from the province for, say, next week, and provide a potential recommendation, and council could formally vote and endorse for or against applying to the program. We don't necessarily need a decision tonight. This way we didn't have a recommendation, but the recommendation or the direction from council could be for staff to come back with more information and kind of a more formal staff report.
Would we need a motion for that?
To you, Ms. Shantz, that would help if you're looking for the clerk's office to schedule a meeting on June 16th, I believe it would be, is next Tuesday. And we'd probably do that at our standard time at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Go ahead.
I'd be happy to put a motion through. I would like additional information. So if staff is able to provide us with more information, I don't think waiting a week will harm us. If it turns out in a week's time that we still have very little insight into this process, we can have a conversation then.
Councillor Bryant will second it. Councillor Schwint, did you want to comment at all, or were you seconding?
Comments on this issue. I'm happy with the motion to defer as well, but I guess I'm questioning, we use an example, the Breslau wet well is in our DCs for I think about 5 million. We know we have to go ahead with a wet well. I think I've heard staff say it's actually going to cost us $12 million. What's their plan? Assume in this program doesn't exist. What is our plan to deal with that $5 million or $12 million expense that's not funded without the program or with the program?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I could provide a more detailed financial analysis as well, including that as an example in the staff report, but at a high level, we wouldn't have sufficient reserves to fund that wet well project, for example. Whatever the cost, whether it's 5 million or 10 million or 12 million, we have negative DC reserves right now and roughly 1 million in collections. So we would have to debenture, essentially issue debt, and then use the existing DC or the DC revenues to pay back that debt. One of our concerns would be if we had sufficient, because of the slowdown and the uncertainty in the housing, if we would have sufficient DC revenue to pay back that initial debt cost to service the debt. Because DC revenue has to be constrained to specific services. So that DC wastewater revenue would have to go to service the cost for that wet well. So it would be also a financial risk.
Okay.
One more
One
then.
more.
For our meeting next week then, could staff come back with a list of shovel-ready projects in order? I know that province's definition of shovel-ready is in flux maybe, or not the same as our definition. I'd like to see us have, say, 8 or 10 projects kind of in a row of readiness. So maybe it doesn't meet what we think the province's definition of shovel-ready is, but we could argue that close enough, just so we can understand the magnitude of money we could apply for or not apply for. Because my understanding is if we decide to apply, we can still say no at the last second if the percentages aren't up to our standards.
Anyone else? Okay, so
If you wouldn't mind, Mayor Shantz, I'll just sort of clarify, make sure I heard the resolution properly. So I think it's to direct staff to schedule a special council meeting on June 16th at 7 p.m. Provide more program information, financial analysis, and a list of shovel-ready projects that could be used to apply to the development charge reduction program.
sounds good. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, thank you. We have a number of items on the consent agenda. Does anyone want to remove anything from there? I have a motion then on the consent agenda. Councillor Bryant, Councillor Burgess, all those in favor, and that is carried. Thank you. We have no unfinished business. We do have one council business, and that is electric vehicle charging station grant funding. Ms. Harrison, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Shantz and members of council. I'm here to speak about staff report R04 2026 electric vehicle charging station grant. The township was successful in receiving $110,430 in grant funding from the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. This includes installation of 2 dual level 2 EV charging stations as part of the previously approved administration building parking lot project and 2 additional dual level 2 EV charging stations at the Woolwich Memorial Centre. The grant will cover 70% of the total project cost for both locations, which lowers the township's contribution from an estimated $70,000 for one location to $49,770 for the 2 locations. These charging stations will improve service for residents and visitors by adding convenient public charging at important municipal, community, and corporate locations, while also supporting climate action. This is good news for Woolwich. By using provincial funding, the township can add EV charging at high-use community sites with a lower cost to the municipality. This supports climate action by making it easier for people to choose electric vehicles, which can help lower transportation emissions and move Woolwich towards a cleaner, lower carbon future. Staff are looking to council to approve the project and to support reallocation of the approved funding for additional EV charging stations at the WMC. If approved, installation could begin this summer and be finished by the end of the year. I can now take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Councillor Bryant, then Councillor Burgess?
Thank you. Through you to Anna. You mentioned there's 2 charging stations going in at the WMC for the public. Are they going to be charged, or is the municipality paying the bill for the electrical charges?
Sorry.
Is the person using the station, like the resident, going to be paying, like insert a credit card type of a thing?
Yes, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Bryant. Yes, it is going to be in line with the St. Jacobs payment, which is $2 per hour.
Thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Thanks a lot for this report and finding some government grants. That's good to hear. Just a couple quick questions. As we have the St. Jacobs ones, I believe those were the first ones we implemented. How has that been going? Like, have they been up and running? Has there been downtime? Has it been lots of people using it? Can you give us a bit background on that?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Burgess. So since they were installed in 2023, the charges have generated approximately $2,800 in revenue and recorded about 6,300 kilowatt hours of usage. which when we put it into perspective is about 37,000 kilometers and a savings of about 5.6 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So they have been used pretty consistently. As far as maintenance goes, I believe there's only been minor issues since they've been installed. I will defer to Thomas on the maintenance for that. He's on virtually.
Mr. Vanderhoff,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. So yeah, we've never had more than one down at a time. We've had, I think, 2 minor issues since they were installed, but for the most part, it's been pretty hassle-free. We do monitor them remotely as well too, so we're notified if there's issues. But yeah, for the most part, it's been pretty hassle-free so far.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, that's fantastic news. I'm really excited about that. Now, you mentioned the St. Jacobs one. I guess I have 2 questions. It's how many chargers do we have in total? And are we seeing the same trends with all of those stations with the cost, we'll call it neutrality? I don't care if we're making money, but if we're coming out even, that would make me happy. So how many chargers in total, and are they cost neutral?
Can you go ahead, Anna? Sure, sounds
Sorry.
good.
Again,
Again, through
Oh,
you, Mayor
you're-
Shantz. Sorry.
Okay,
We've got the
Mr. Vanderhoff, I guess.
Sorry, we've got the two dual charging stations in St. Jacobs, so it would be the same as what's proposed at each of the sites for the admin building and for the WMC. When we look at our expenses, so there is a service fee that's associated with the chargers, and then the hydro costs were right around break even, give or take a couple $100.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, my last question here. Number 3 there of the motion, just could you expand on the last part and says sign any associated documents with the OVIN? Is there any requirements or obligations that we have to this to get the funding long term?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. That is just in reference to, in order to move forward with the funding agreement, we do need a resolution from council on this. So that's what that is referring to. But in terms of long-term, no, I don't believe there's anything, any additional asks from council.
Councillor Schwint.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with the funding application. We were able to get some provincial money on this. I am a little bit concerned with the budget, and I know that I've been told that this budget's at a high level because of time constraints. But I was comparing the cost per unit of, call it $60,000-$70,000, and you listed 3 or 4 other publicly available charging stations in Elmira, and I was giving an installation cost of about $5,000 per station at those areas. So I know things will be more expensive here at the township, but the order of magnitude I'm struggling with. Have we looked at changing that to a class 3 charger at the Memorial Center, which might be more appropriate for commercial use, people in and out quickly, so you can charge in half an hour during a hockey game versus 2 or 3 hours for a full charge? Was that investigated, and how confident are you on the competitiveness of these quotes?
Ms. Harrison.
Yep. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Schwint. So these charging stations are 19.2 kilowatts per port, which allows for 120 kilometers of charge per hour. So they are the fastest level 2 on the market right now. So comparable to level 3. I think the ones in St. Jacobs are around 7 kilowatts, which is about 40 minutes or 40 kilometers of range for charging for an hour. So they are on the higher side of the what's on the market right now. In terms of quotes, maybe Thomas can speak to that. I know we were pretty strapped for time for getting this grant application in, so we had one quote that we went with, but I can defer to Thomas if he has any other comments on the quote.
Yeah, so in regards to the chargers, we're fully confident in the cost of the equipment itself because we did receive a firm pricing from Flow. charge. And then in terms of some of the other costing, it was a level 3 quote that we received from our electrician. We did need to make some assumptions there, and the numbers probably are slightly high. However, I don't know if Anna maybe can speak to this, but if we do come in under budget, I'm assuming that proportion of funding, grant funding, will be reduced appropriately. But the numbers that we've proposed are safe, and so we don't anticipate being over budget. In regards to level 3 charging as well too, I know I can speak fairly confidently to the administration building, and that we likely would have run into servicing issues at that facility for hydro. The Woolwich Memorial Center can't necessarily speak to that, but that's something that again, we didn't really fully have time to explore and have confidence in the quoting at the time, because we would have required consultant to have a look at both sites and provide pricing for those upgrades if necessary.
Did you have anything to add to that, Anna?
Just that any unused funds would be returned to the funders, and the allocations for each party would be adjusted
accordingly. Yeah. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, if I were to buy a computer today, I could go and get double the computer for half the price in a couple years from now, just because of the rate of change in technology. Are we concerned about EV chargers kind of having that same, we'll call it technological aging out?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau. That is a great question and a great point. I think because we are going with the kind of higher end model of the level 2 at a 19.2 kilowatt hour, that is, I don't see surpassing that within the near future. So I think that can instill some confidence in these chargers. But of course, you're right, technology is evolving very quickly. So it's hard to say if we'll be able to keep up, but I think this is a good start.
I'm not seeing any more questions. There's a recommendation here. Would someone care to move it? Councillor Grant, Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have three bylaws listed on the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, sure, Councillor Grant, all those in favor? And that's carried, thanks. Yeah, and that concludes the council portion of the meeting. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and Councillor Burgess will be back to chair committee of the whole.
Good evening. We are now meeting as Committee of the Whole for items that require more debate and discussion. We will not be making final decisions on these items, but proposing recommendations for the next council meeting. If anyone in the community has feedback on these recommendations, we encourage you to reach out to staff or submit comments to council before a final decision is made at the next meeting. First up on our agenda, we have the Asset Management Annual Progress Report, and we have the Asset Management Coordinator, Chelsea Raymond, here in person to present her report. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Burgess. I'm just going to do a few introductory remarks. So Chelsea Raymond, the Asset Management Coordinators, here going to present the Asset Management Plan update. Chelsea joined the finance team just late in 2026 as a result of a reorg structure. And some of our focus right now with the Asset Management Plan and the DCE study that we referred to is really to integrate a lot of these financial plans into developing a more integrated budget approach as part of the journey for the budget in 2027. So a lot of this work is foundational. A lot of the inputs into the financial plan, the asset management is a key component into that. And she'll be going through kind of the latest update to the asset management plan, but I'll also jump in for some slides to provide an update to council on the progress on the financial side. We're going to kind of tag team on this with that. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a second here. And I'll hand it over to Chelsea Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. So in front of you tonight is just a review of the asset management planning approach that supports staff and council in making evidence-based decisions on infrastructure assets to maintain overall asset performance and deliver service at the total life cycle cost. So when we're talking about asset management, it's important because it enables municipalities to do more with less, with a structured way to track that performance, cost, and risk to meet service objectives efficiently. So it integrates the capital operating budgets, life cycle strategies, and growth. Knowing where that trade-off is between cost, risk, and levels of service helps make the best data-driven decisions to maximize value from assets. It also uses a long-term lens, so infrastructure needs are planned for, life cycles are optimized, and helps move away from reactive to proactive planning approach. As we look to OREG 58817, which is the regulation that really requires municipalities to meet certain requirements and plan for municipal infrastructure. We've completed all of the deadlines requirements since 2019, and now we're moving into the ongoing reporting requirements of the regulation. So our last 2024 and 2025 council approved plans form the basis for this annual reporting requirement, which is what is being presented tonight. So when we look at the purpose of the annual progress report, it's really to support the municipality in improving the asset management planning approach by identifying the progress, the factors impeding that progress, and the opportunities and solutions to address these factors in the context of continuous improvement. So we're thinking about how can we improve the next asset management plan. So that includes the systems, the data, the processes that form those plans. And really helps to answer the questions of where we are in the journey, what is and isn't working, what's impeding us, and what forward-looking actions are needed to improve. And just to provide a high-level summary of the snapshot of the condition distribution for the services that are included in the portfolio. Overall, with the updates made, the township's estimated replacement cost is around $1.2 billion, which factors inflation, and there's an overall average condition of good. Individually, the services range from very good to fair. Looking specifically at those OREG requirements, in terms of progress, we've improved on our asset inventories. For example, completing a detailed review of our sewer inspection information to gap fill and link that information to assets, and minimizing the backlog of asset information from subdivision development. We've also updated or kept up to date our condition assessments for roads and bridges, and the projects completed last year help contribute to that state of good repair as well. Some of those factors that are impeding implementation, are those affecting the financial planning, which will be expanded on shortly. Factors related to the data and information include data quality and assumptions, lack of condition assessments, software limitations, including integration and not fully utilizing existing software, and general factors related to systems, policies, and procedures, like the maturity and completeness of existing documentation, workloads and budget constraints, and timing with other activities.
Just over to me to provide a little bit of financial context. So I think council will remember this slide. This is the one that stood out to me, at least from a financial perspective. Looking at the base case, and this is where that 8.4% came to, looking at our 10-year funding requirements of 158 million. So that resulted, looking at our current existing funding, that we would need an 8.4% increase each year. With kind of the shift of asset management over the finance department, we've had the ability to get a better understanding of kind of the financial plan that was produced as part of that asset management plan. So just for context, the original financial plan was provided by the consultant there. So we had some of our financial staff review some of the work done by the consultant. So the consultant assumed some standard municipal budgeting practices. Again, they did good work. We worked very closely with them, but they may not have been aware of some of the nuances related to our financial program. So tracking at least the financial progress depends on kind of financial plan stability. I mean, an easy way to think of this is you really have to understand that the inputs going into the plan are solid before you can actually measure progress against the plan. So this is kind of a very busy graph, and there's a lot of things going on, but essentially the blue bar here is our 2023 budget. So this is our 5-year budget. So at the time, we were only producing 5-year capital plans. The OREG requires a 10-year capital plan. So we were only doing 5 years in both 2023 and 2024. The orange bar is the 2024 budget. So you can see the amount of change between the 2023 budget and the 2024 budget. In 2026, for example, we've gone from estimating 14 million to over 60 million, and then it went back down in the 2025 budget. That's really the wet well was kind of pushed out. In the later years, the costs again go up, but you can see kind of the line, both the 2025 and 2026 are kind of aligned there. So it means we haven't really adjusted the estimates past 2028 to 2034. So there hasn't been really any changes. And you can see that it drops quite a bit in those later years. And that's just because we haven't really fleshed out the later years of our 10-year capital plan. So we're not actually only going to spend $11 million or $12 million. We're actually going to spend much more, probably a lot closer to the average, but we just haven't fleshed out that 10-year capital plan. And that's, again, a lot of the work that we're doing as part of the 2027 budget process is trying to align the DC work, the asset management plan work, and the other work. And for reference, we alluded to it previously that our DC study has a very high number of capital projects. So 330 million roughly divided by 10 years is $33 million a year. That we would have to do. So these are just growth related projects. And then we also have renewal projects. So this budget should at least be at this level. But these were some of the inputs that were provided into the capital plan. So again, some of the work that we're trying to do is integrate the asset management plan into our existing budget processes. The other bars that you're seeing here are essentially our budgeted amounts and our spending amounts. So we've had a number of discussions about we're not spending up to budget. So the asset management plan assumed that we were spending up to budget. But the other item here is that a number of projects are transferred from year to year. So we're rebudgeting kind of the same projects. So the asset management plan didn't fully take into account kind of projects being budgeted for over multiple years, which is our current process. Again, we're trying to update and reconcile this, but long story short, we weren't able to do kind of the progress that we're making, analyze the progress that we're making from a financial perspective on our asset management plan because the inputs to that plan have changed substantially since we first did our 2025 budget. We know our DC projects, there's a number of those that potentially wouldn't be in the asset management plan. So when we do our updated asset management plan, we should be able to align it with your updated budget process and provide a lot more value on the financial progress of the asset management plan. But essentially, our DCs and our capital budget are primary inputs into the financial strategy of the asset management plan.
So then going back to the third point of the OREG for a strategy to address some of these barriers, we did review the recommendations from the previous plans and also focus on those that are aligned with current improvement initiatives, as Director Lynn mentioned. So some of the activities that'll help improve integrating asset information with long-term financial planning activities, include starting to tie asset numbers to using project numbering, and starting to implement a standardized project management approach. To enhance the asset information and lifecycle delivery, some activities include expanding that condition assessment, enhancing the data alignment and integration to develop more of a single source of truth, and standardizing processes. And then improving and refining methods for updating replacement costs and enhancing alignment with the tangible capital asset inventory will also help to inform asset investment decisions. So just looking for the next steps in where we're going and to further refine our strategy, we are planning a maturity assessment and gap analysis to help establish a baseline of our performance against those best practices and international standards. So this will provide us with a structured framework to demonstrate our progress, prioritize our activities, and understand the resourcing requirements with the use of a roadmap. We have engaged a consultant to help develop this tool in 2026 for a more focused set of maturity indicators to target the identified factors impeding progress. This will provide an objective assessment to help reveal blind spots, any dependent activities, and a framework. The framework can be used to develop our internal capabilities and expand that assessment in the future. Maturity is key to enhancing an organization's performance, to showing the progress and identifying what we're aiming for, and better understand how we could develop those asset management capabilities. And this is just an example to show what the maturity assessment and gap analysis might look like. But we would focus on a smaller set of capabilities to start. So we'll be using this type of framework as a tool to track our progress and expand our assessments in the future. So just to summarize, through the annual progress report and with the help of a maturity assessment, we'll be able to gain a better understanding of where we are in our journey and how to improve the delivery of services long term.
Thank you for the report and the work on that. Does council have any questions? All right, seeing none, there is a recommendation on the agenda. Does someone want to move it? Councillor Grant, Councillor Cadeau, any other discussion? Call it to question. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, thank you. Moving on to the next item, we have IS 17-2026, Water and Wastewater Investigation. We have the Director of Infrastructure Services, Jared Poupé, and Mr. Lynn here in person to present their report. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Burgess, through you to council. This is just an update report based on direction from council to investigate some of the fiscal health of the water and sewer reserves. Feels like a couple steps forward, a few steps backwards sometimes. It is a complex process, but I just want to reiterate there is good work happening. I think that's important for council to understand. I think one of the biggest improvements has been with the finance, billing, and operations. We had a massive backlog and trying to understand exactly what services were tied to what properties. I think we've really closed the door on that. Now we're back to some very manageable numbers. Basically, finance is raising flags monthly, and we're able to resolve a lot of those issues. So I think that's really important going forward. So we've kind of tightened up that. I think we've got all the wins we can get out of that. I think the bigger pieces now for infrastructure side would be based on water loss understanding and knowing what your water loss is, as well as continued investment in the I&I. I think there will be a tipping point to that as far as a cost benefit analysis goes with respect to I&I in particular. Obviously, there is going to be I&I in your system. And the township has been here before doing the third pipe system too. There was some investments in capital programming to try to eliminate some of the I&I. That was through reconstructions. Now we've gotten into lining. I think it's much more cost effective to do lining of your maintenance holes and your sewers and your sewer laterals. And that's what council's initiated here. And we have that program underway. So we're expecting to see some improvements going forward. I think something to caution on, and something we were experiencing a bit in St. Jacobs, is even though we've had really good initiatives on water in Yonge Street, we knew that was a high source for infiltration. We've also migrated that problem. So we're staying monitoring and we're isolating the locations, but we've seen that some of that has moved to some other paths of least resistance, we'll say. That's what water tends to do. So again, we know there is an inflow input in the west side, and we are actively investigating that. That is going to be occurring on the 15th of June. And we're continuing to look to make some investments in St. Jacobs in this 2027 budget year coming up. On the water loss side, I think there's always good things that come out of bad situations with the water crisis in particular, with all the area municipalities being invested in the interim risk management framework who were affected by the Mannheim issues. One of the big takeaways was water loss. I think we are all in the region of Waterloo at varying maturity levels with respect to their water loss. The American Water and Wastewater Association has the bar for water loss through M36, which is a procedure for which municipalities can follow, because we were told unexplicitly that you should have no estimate with respect to water loss. You should know what it is. And that was through our facilitator, Mr. Carl Yates. And I think that was good information. I think the area municipalities really took hold of that as things that we can do to improve, conservation obviously being another one, but water loss being critically important from an operations perspective. So we do have, while it's not contained in the report, we have set up some discussions with area municipal partner as they have been doing this practice since about 2017, and it has greatly improved their water loss situation. So that's something that the Township of Woolwich will be looking to move forward on. It will come, and I don't have that information yet. I just wanted to raise that today, but it will come with some investment requirements with respect to how we resource personnel, as well as some financial implications too. And we're hoping to be able to report back for this budget cycle into 2027, just to see what that looks like and maybe what that ongoing process is. We understand there's some upfront costs to get the program running, but once it's running, it's relatively easy to maintain. It's just kind of getting that initial piece in place. I would say that there continues to be attention to this. And I think, unfortunately, we had a very significant, again, winter snowpack and rainfall in the spring. That's evidenced throughout the report with the varying graphs. You can see some of the impacts with respect to I&I in the system. What has come from that is when you get snowpack with precipitation, you might not see things react in the day of the precipitation. It can be days or weeks later as groundwater is saturated and then drains away. So I think that's part of what we're seeing too. And you don't know what you don't know, I guess. So this is part of the ongoing monitoring piece. Unfortunately, it will take some time here. It's not a quick fix. This occurs over time with aged infrastructure, and there are other varying pieces that we need to attend to, such as water loss and other inputs, and we are chasing some of those in Elmira. So this is the first investment in Elmira, which is definitely the worst location for us right now in the township, and we have narrowed down that Birdland represents about 51% of the entire I&I problem in Elmira. So again, monitoring and isolating locations is critically important, and then executing on the programs. And at some point, what is that cost benefit? And I think we're on that journey right now. But we envision certainly a few years of significant investment in some sewer lining programming. And I don't know if Director Lynn has further additional information to add.
Sure. Thanks, Director Poupé, and through you, Chair Burgess. I have a few slides just to kind of reiterate what Director Poupé said, more from a financial lens, just to show some of the work that's been ongoing and some of the findings that we've had from some of the analysis. So again, just to refresh Council's memory, on the water and sewer side, we're on the higher end compared to our peers related to the utility billing. It's related to a number of things, partially due to the way we allocate costs to our sewer section, but also in many ways, we're using revenue to offset a lot of our losses, our wholesale losses. And we can see that we're trying to adjust kind of our revenues up to make up for our kind of lost costs. As Director Poupet mentioned, we made a lot of progress on our billing area, working closely with the operations team. The blue bar was the no reads, which is essentially meters that had no meter readings. So working with the operations group and sending out work orders and finding those fields, we've reduced from 97 back this time last year to down to 29. The other ones, we call them orphan meters, which are essentially meters that are getting a reading. But now that they don't have an account associated with them, and we've reduced that number to from 44, and now we just have one essentially, just kind of as it pops up every so often, and we're addressing those right away. So there's been a lot of work to date on kind of on the billing side and working with the operations group. Again, we're following up much more quickly on outstanding work orders. So meters are being replaced. If they're not getting meters read, they're being replaced more quickly. On the finance side, we're comparing billing reports to consumption reports, making sure we have more accuracy. Census Analytics is our consumption service, and we compare those reports to our field teams to make sure that are those meters reading appropriate discrepancies. And then we're just making sure that everything's being posted correctly to the general ledger that we need to. But again, as Director Poupet mentioned, it is a little bit of one step forward, two steps back. So it did seem like we were definitely making progress. So again, the history, we've discussed this many times, that there's been a number of significant deficits over the year. In 2022, that was related to the auto flusher loss. But 23 and 24, particularly on the wastewater side, we saw significant deficits. It looked like we were turning a bit of a corner in 2025. But again, looking at more analysis, we also understood that there were auto flusher issues both in 2024, which is a catch up, and in 2025, which had skewed some of those financial results. We've also learned that a large industrial user was a water user, but then they were also charged for sewer billing. So that user left the township. And in 2024, for example, they were contributing $400,000 in sewer billing, but weren't actually using our sewer system. So that was essentially, I would say, surplus revenue that now basically exacerbated kind of the existing situation. So there was over $2 million from this customer for the last 7 or 8 years, which would have shown much larger deficits. So this has been an ongoing issue, what we've kind of determined. It's not more of a recent issue, it's actually a longer term issue. We've also found another high user that uses a significant amount of water, but they're not billed for sewer. They have a township sewer connection. We don't think they're using the sewer, but we have to do more investigative work to make sure that they're not actually using and discharging into the sewer. So there are other areas that we're investigating for that. But we have the most up-to-date information that we have from our financial perspective. So this wasn't contained in the Q1 report. We knew we were kind of trending poorly at Q1. So this is our latest May statements. And it's important to also understand that we're usually 1 month behind in some of our billings. So this could even be higher potentially once we get the April billing from the region. But essentially what we're projecting so far in wastewater, we have a $700,000 deficit as of April or May of 2026. And on the water side, we have a $350,000 deficit. So combined, we're close to $1 million, which is close to the numbers that we were seeing in previous years. So we had done kind of a deeper dive, a little bit more of an analysis. So these graphs, most of the settlement areas, this is on the water side. The biggest drivers we're seeing is between the township billing. So this is how much we bill our residents, and this is how much we bill the region. So the darker bars are how much we bill the region. So in Elmira in particular, this is on the water side, we see a larger gap. Those numbers should be fairly close. And this indicates kind of a water loss kind of issue, and it's focused really in Elmira. In wastewater, again, this lines up with our financial results. We see the same kind of pattern. St. Jacobs, we also see wastewater issues, but this is kind of a known issue in St. Jacobs. But again, the biggest discrepancy between what we bill our customers and what the region bills us is really in the Elmira area. So that's really kind of what's driving a lot of these deficits. So I don't want to go into like detailed statistics here, but essentially like a correlation or like a statistical measure of what's driving different variances. And just want to kind of explain to council, a lot of this work we've kind of been building on the fly. So we do have more analysts and we are taking a deeper look, but we didn't just have this historical data that we could just run reports in. We've essentially had to develop data sets and data tables. But now, thanks to some of the benefits of AI, a lot of the analysis can be done much more quickly. I don't want to go into the details of how you calculate a correlation coefficient, but just to know that there's a very statistical measure you can compare two different variables to try to understand what's driving those pieces. So we use some of those kind of statistical measures to plug in some of that historical data into these utility deficits. And so there was a correlation of kind of negative 0.8, which means it's an extremely high correlation. So essentially what's driving our deficits is the amount of regional billing. So the higher the regional billing, the higher our deficit. So we see a definite relationship to that. So that essentially means that the amount of billing that the region gives is what's essentially causing these deficits. One of the more difficult ones, this is me trying to understand kind of what's driving the regional billing. So this green line here essentially layers in precipitation levels over the years. So one of the surprising findings is there isn't a direct correlation between how wet or how much precipitation there is in a year to the amount of deficit. So this would be our driest year here, and this would be our wettest year, but our wettest year isn't showing much of a deficit, where this is our kind of second driest year, and it's one of our largest deficits. So it's not just rainfall or snowfall in a given year. As Director Poupé said, there's a lot more other factors with like the intensity of the rain, the saturation levels, the melt, all these kind of things that can be doing this. But I like the fact that this is giving us at least somewhere where we can look and narrow down some of that focus. So on the sewer side, I think it's really important to think about how a sewer system operates. So essentially the way we bill is water coming in is essentially what's billed to our residents. So we assume that any water coming in through the water meter is discharged into our wastewater system, and that's how we bill for sewer. We don't have a sewer meter that people are paying. So that's essentially the way we bill for sewer. But in this graph, it's showing essentially inflow and infiltration that say like the downspouts could be connected to sewer laterals. There could be things coming in from the storm sewer. There could be cracks in manholes or cracks in pipes. So essentially the rainwater or the storm water or any other kind of water is entering the sanitary system. But this is the point where we bill our residents at the house, because that's how much we say. But out here in the sewage treatment plant is where the region actually bills us. So there's that big gap of the unknown between someone's house and then the regional treatment plant where we're seeing a lot of that. And Jared had kind of mentioned kind of the specific areas. So we do see a correlation from sewer usage to precipitation, at least in 2024. On a longer term analysis, we did we went all the way back to 2018, and there isn't as much of a correlation, but it is still a weak to moderate relationship to precipitation levels. So we do know that the spring melt, for example, has a huge impact on some of these deficits. So this is essentially showing the sewer volumes by month, particularly in the sewer volumes. Again, there's a lot of different years there. It's going back to 2018, so there's 8 or 9 years here. But you can see that there is a definite spike. It depends on the year, but there's definitely a spike between March and May, which corresponds to the spring melt. So again, we know that that's the increase, but then there's other weird kind of anomalies in different months, and we're not really sure exactly what that means. But the interesting thing here is the 2026 bar is the pink one, and that's the very top. So over the past 8 years, what we've experienced over the last 2 months is the highest we've ever experienced in the municipality, at least for March and April over the past 8 years. So we've never had over 200,000, only on 2 occasions, and now we're at 220,000 for both March and April. We looked at the water system. We found something a little bit unusual. I wasn't expecting to see that. No surprise that the drier the conditions, the correspond to higher water use. That's not unusual. If you have a really dry summer, more people water their lawns and use more water. But what was really interesting, at least to me, was precipitation or the drier summer were negatively correlated to water deficits. So that essentially means that the more water people use, the bigger our deficits. So the drier the summer, the larger our deficits, which means that the more water people use, the more money we lose, essentially. So essentially, our water loss increases the more water that people use. So when it's a really wet and people don't use water, there's less of a deficit. The more water people use, the larger the deficit, which essentially we lose more water through the system. So we're not really sure exactly what's driving this. One reason could be like the water meters, for example. The more water that is being used, the less that the water meters are picking up. It could be that there's more water loss. There could be leaks somewhere in the system and more water is being lost. Jared alluded to some of that. Understanding exactly how much water is being lost. So the more water that's going to the system, the leak is essentially bigger. Or it could be some users aren't being billed and they're also using more. And now they're not being billed. And when their usage goes up, the amount we're losing goes up. So just trying to say that there's more work that needs to be done to understand some of these variances. This to me was probably the most eye-opening thing, and I hope I can do this kind of graph justice, but I think it explains in a nutshell kind of the problem related to our utility deficits. The dark blue bar is the amount that comes into our water system from the region. So this essentially is the region saying this is how much water your system is going to use. So that is essentially the blue bar. So that's all the water that comes into Elmira in this case. The lighter blue amount is how much we actually bill our customers. So this is essentially the loss. So this is how much the region says we're supplying you, and this is how much you're actually collecting from your customers. So there is a large gap between how much we're collecting from the region and how much we're collecting from our residents. So this explains to me, at least that water loss. What we're trying to do is increase that pretty close to what the region bill us, so we're not losing that revenue. So it could be either water loss or mixed billing. So that's some of the work that we're doing too. This orange bar, they should be pretty close because like we said, any water that gets used by a household, we bill for the sewer piece. So those numbers should be pretty close. But we are aware of some of those industrial users. So potentially that could be driving some of that difference, but it is a very small difference, but it should be pretty close. The biggest difference now is, so this is how much we're generating from our household users or our industrial users, our customers. But then the light orange bar is how much the region is charging us. And these are all in cubic meters. This is how much the region are charging us to treat the wastewater. So we're billing, and just 60,000 cubic meters here, but the region are charging us to treat 120,000 cubic meters. What I find interesting in this graph is this is the total amount of water that's entering the system. So even if hypothetically we could bill for every drop of water that comes into the system, we would only be able to bill, that's the theoretical maximum that we could build. You can see in other months, it's a little bit closer. March and April, it's even higher. So it's over 220,000. So we're only billing around 60,000. So what we've seen is the billing from the sewer remains static, but the actual regional billing is sometimes 3 times what we're collecting from our residents. So if you think about this from a wholesale retail kind of thing, that we're only collecting, 1 cubic meter and maybe collecting $2 or $3 from our residents, but then the region, for every 1 cubic meter that's being used from our residents, the region are treating 3 cubic meters in some cases, and they're charging us the wholesale rate $6 So we're collecting $3 and getting charged $6 for the same amount. And that essentially explains kind of our water loss. So this is what we're trying to do, is create these data sets with this historical data to pinpoint some of these areas, identify the relationships between water usage, seeing if these new water meters will close the gap. So we're hoping to see, once we install the new water meters, do those bars start to come together? Like we can calculate the difference, at least on the water side, and maybe a little bit on the sewer side. Continuing with the sanitary lining program that we talked about, and there was CCTV work that was done in 2025. So hopefully that can identify areas where we can focus. Looking at more metering to see, like, localizing where those things are happening. Birdland was an example, but what specific areas can we see? Because we know that water's coming in at a certain amount, but water's coming out at a certain amount. So we could maybe narrow down that. And I do think it's worth a conversation too with the region to understand if these numbers seem reasonable, because they seem completely out of whack with what we're billing our customers. But maybe there's billing issues on the regional side too, that maybe there's some mix up. We've seen that in other areas. So potentially they could be overbilling us as well. So we at least know where to focus some of our efforts. So just wanted to let council know some of the work that's been done to date. We wish we had more answers, but we have been making some progress on this. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation and your work on that. Does council have any questions? Councillor Cadeau and then Councillor Bryant.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, a few questions, if I may. Director Poupe mentioned cost benefit and be a point of diminishing returns. But is there a situation where we can spend more money on this and come to a resolution quicker, or maybe try to close that gap more quickly if we were to spend more money?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I think we're, you got to appreciate, we're just sort of through you, Chair Burgess, to Councillor Cadeau. I think we're just, starting the process in Elmira, right? We were looking in St. Jacobs, and I think we feel pretty comfortable about solving the St. Jacobs issue. And I think we're going to be into a couple of years, at least 3, I would think, of a significant investment, given that the numbers where we are. And I think there's a few pieces. So what we're hoping is, let us get through this investment that's happening now. It's a couple million total that we're hoping to invest in Elmira now. And then sort of let's see what goes on in the spring of next year. We're going to recommend, another 2 to 3 million potentially for the entire system for St. Jacobs and in Elmira for budget. And again, maybe it's a 2.5 in Elmira, 500,000 in St. Jacobs to hopefully rectify that issue is where our heads are right now. And I think at that point, you make that kind of investment, you're kind of in the $4 to $5 million range. You're hoping you're going to see some improvements. And it's not lost on anybody. The tiered system doesn't make things easy, right? I mean, we have anchor monitors now trying to truth some of these numbers as well. And so there's a number of pieces that are kind of moving right now. But I think we, probably council hates to hear this, but we do need some time and we do need some weather still. And the ongoing support from council to keep investing in this program.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, if I could, my apologies. Just want to stay with this for a minute, because I think Councillor Cadeau's question is an interesting one, because I reflect on the fact that when I arrived in 2007, there was an active program between the region and the township jointly funding I&I work. That was important at that time, because the region was basically saying, we are not going to invest in significant multi-million-dollar upgrades at our wastewater treatment plant until you get your I&I house in order. There, however, was eventually a meeting of the minds, which, and I don't know, Mr. Poupe, if this is where you're also kind of going, is that there has to be an evaluation on the effectiveness of what you're finding and a cost benefit analysis. And I know the cost benefit analysis done at the time was that Eventually, it was discovered that the amounts of millions of dollars that was being spent between the region and the township on I&I, sometimes to find pinhole size leaks in the system, it was going to be more cost effective to ultimately make improvements at the wastewater treatment plants in terms of capital upgrades. And again, while maybe not directly related to, some of the findings and analysis we are here, I thought it was relevant because of the fact that, I&I has had a historical issue, so much so that the region and the township jointly funded programs back in 2007 and before. But then purposely made a decision to move away from that for a number of years because there was more focus on making improvements at the wastewater treatment plant itself. So just some historical context.
Councillor Bryant?
Thank you. Through you to Calm. Have we had major conversations with the region about the charges? Because I really question how we can be double going in as to, like, when we bill our residents, they get billed equally. What water they pay for is the water they get charged for going back out. And I question how we can have so much more going back into the system when we haven't brought that much in. I know there's I&I, but is it that much? Like, I really question their numbers, their billing.
Through you, Chair Burgess, that is definitely something now we can I'd like to understand that rather than just pay the bill and assume that. I would love to be able to say we are only paying for the water we use the same way our residents do. So we're only going to pay $100,000, but I think just the way the delegation of responsibilities is, we're responsible for the sewer mains in between the household and the treatment plants, but we will definitely be investigating to make sure the accuracy of the billing and how they come up with those billings, just like any resident would for asking us if they received a bill that high.
Yeah, because exactly, prove to me that we owe you that kind of money, show me the bills type of thing. Because I do question those numbers. I just find it hard to believe.
So do we have monitors on our side of the treatment plant going into it compared to theirs to compare?
Through Burgess, Councillor Burgess, Council, yes, on both Elmira and St. Jacobs. That's part of this. I mean, so we've isolated very well, I'd say, in St. Jacobs. And Elmira, I think we've got a really good handle on where our problems are, and then we just need to further break that down. But Birdland is by far and away the biggest culprit. Elmira also has direct connections. Those are easy wins this year too. So I think you're going to expect to see some of that. There are literally direct connections from storm to wastewater in Elmira that we're aware of. And those are just pieces that we're executing on. So we're going after some easy wins as well as some lining. Lining is a bit more time because you're going to line your main line, and then we're likely to come back to council maybe for pre-budget approval for the lateral lining, potentially near the end of the year, to see the progress that we're able to make on that. But you need to do your main line first and then your lateral line. And it's unfortunate that it's typically your lateral line where you get the bigger wins. That's generally where you see the problem between private to public side. That connection is usually a problem. And obviously roof water leaders direct connected, reverse slope driveways direct connected, stuff like that.
Mayor Sean said she still has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was sort of going back in history as Mr. Bramman did. And I know when I started on council in 2006, there was significant work being done in Birdland, and then we stopped. Do you know, and I realize you weren't here then, but do you know, did that make a difference?
Through you, Chair Burgess, to Mayor Shantz, it did. I think the challenge at the time was it was an invasive reconstruction, so it's very significant output of capital to separate the systems. We do that in recons now, where you've got nominally separated sewers. So we have the old sewer is separated by a weir wall, essentially, where there's a cellar drain system. It's only in Elmira, lucky us. But there is mixing that can occur. So I think that was the real focus at the time, was to kind of hit some of those spots. But that dollar just didn't go very far. So you'd get Blue Jay Way done or something like that, right? You'd get a street, but it was so cost prohibitive that I do believe the analysis ended up saying it's actually cheaper to treat the clean water than to continue down that road. So it was in around, I wish I could remember exact year, but I would say 2016, 17-ish, we started moving forward with lining, and that's been very successful and a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak, with respect to what you can accomplish and how you can seal up your systems for much more cost effectively than ripping up a road now.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Chair. Following up on something Director Poupé said, potentially some of the issues being private, whether it be downspouts connected, maybe it's some pumps that have been connected. And when I look at the graph and I see March and April being the biggest discrepancies, to me, it kind of correlates with sub pump season. Mine was running pretty steadily in March and April. So could we explore a private examination to try to limit some of these, especially in birdland, because maybe it was the builders at the time were connecting sub pumps right to the lateral. And if we could go in and find those, we would be able to easily correct them. Well, we would be able to correct them, I'll say.
Yeah, through you, Chair Burgess, to Councillor Cadeau. So I think that's exactly the investigative initiatives. There's smoke testing and things like that where we can, confirm if there is direct connections to the system. We have been executing on that work too, so that is occurring. Sump pump discharge internal, just for public's benefit, is illegal. You are not to connect directly your storm water to the wastewater system. Obviously, this is difficult to police. This has been an ongoing challenge for our department in particular. As long as I've been here, we've been tasked with some form of a sump pump policy or program. It's just very difficult. And some of the things that we've explored in that is providing maybe incentive for people. Is there something that council might be interested in doing to explore that? Is there an incentive to get people out of the system? I appreciate that. And then what are people going to do with the pipe? Right? It goes into the wastewater system. They probably think it's fine. It's not going on their grass. It's not blocking our sidewalk. But you still have to provide an outlet, and that's where staff try to advocate for a sump pump program of some form within the operating budget that we could help people, appreciating that people can't just relocate their sump pump easily. They may need infrastructure. They might need a storm sewer lateral. So there's a lot to consider there. But I think the easy piece now is just to investigate, try to find those easy wins and deal with them. We can get people out of with roof water leaders. We can provide them to surface and so forth, and try to educate people. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation, I think, with respect to how we can help the residents.
Councillor Schmidt.
Thanks. Wanted to follow up on questions earlier about the billing between the region and township. I think staff indicated we've got meters going into the treatment plant. Can we see that data sometime at a future meeting to understand what those differences are? If it's out 10%, okay. If it's out 50%, I'd like to understand those numbers better, since they're in place already. The other graph you had was water billing and water sales by region. Breslau was missing on that one. Is there a significant discrepancy in Breslau, or where are we at there?
Wastewater, so the city of Kitchener, so it would be including the building would be the waste.
Yeah, through you, Chair Burgess, we can look into that data. Like one of the nuances with Breslau is it's not necessarily the region that provide the wastewater treatment. It's more on the water side, because it also goes into the city of Kitchener for the wastewater. But we'll have a look at the water side, see if we can get some of that information too. We did notice that Elmira was the largest area, but there was just an oversight if Breslau wasn't included.
Okay. Well, that would be helpful, thanks. And I know the water meter program, I think, is about a year old now. We've been changing some. Have we gone back and checked individuals or groups of meters and say, hey, they're making a difference or it's not making a difference? I know we can't do it all, but on a subset.
Yeah, through you, Chair Burgess, to Councillor Schwint. So that is on the street right now. The water meter replacement program is on the street. So we actually haven't initiated that. It will be happening and will be occurring shortly. In Breslau, with respect to the sewer, It's their newest system. We've lined the trunk sewer. We knew it was leaky for some time, and that was the first sort of lining work we did. So we feel that Breslau and the monitoring reflects that on the wastewater side for us is the tightest system I think we have. I think the challenge you get in Breslau with a new development community like that is you can have extraneous flows being discharged as a result of building. I don't want to point fingers, but it can happen. So that's where you tend to see inputs as things are being built out. And once they get to a place of build out, it's a new system. Obviously we should look at the data, but from our flow monitoring perspective in the wastewater side, it is very good right now.
Sorry, it's the water one that was missing on the graph. The
Gotcha.
wastewater I thought looked pretty good. If Chair would give me one more question, what is the plan for the $1 million deficit? We've got the 1/4 or 40% of the year in. How are we going to manage this for the next 8 months so that we don't have a $2.5 million budget or budget deficit come January?
Director Lynn or Director Boupé?
Through you, Chair Burgess, there's not a whole lot we can do, at least on the finance side. Like reducing costs is a small component of this. It's really that discrepancy between the region and our own billing. We can definitely look into, as Councillor Bryan suggested, looking into more of that. But it would be funded through reserves, any deficit. I'd look to any of my colleagues to provide other answers of how to reduce a potential deficit like this.
To you, Chair Burgess, to Councillor Schwinn and Council, I guess I think if we look back just in recent memory of 2024, we looked at the water and sewer budget, there were spikes at times. Focusing on January, February, March, and April, right, we're seeing those discrepancies. What we're expecting with these investments is that we are going to smooth this out. Are we going to get it perfect? No, but I think we're going to get a better picture. And I think that's really what the intent here. I think the important part is for us to continue to monitor, to continue to work hand in glove with respect to the regional billings versus what we're billing and correlating that data, and then looking at see what the improvements are making, and then just report back to council. I think that's what the intent of the update is, and we will endeavor to bring updates back more regular. And I apologize, that was really on me as far as the delay here. So I think that's something that we're hoping to be able to report back on more frequently, we'll say.
Councillor Schwinn?
I understand the reporting mechanism. People get busy, that's fine. That's not my concern at the moment. My concern is the actual bank balance. Because if we're down $1 million so far to year to date, I'll assume that March, April, or February, March, April are our worst deficits because of rainfall and snow melt. So the rest of the year shouldn't be as bad, except there's probably going to be problems in November, December with snow melting. So we're looking at probably $1.8 million deficit anyway for this year. So that's what we're going to be facing, or guess what? We're not facing, the new council's facing. Maybe we should be a little proactive now in terms of dealing with those numbers.
Director Lynn?
Through you, Chair Burgess, I think there's a couple options. We did put in money into the previous budget of operating contingency. Unfortunately, we've had to use the operating contingency, so we know it won't be sufficient. So we can't use the operating contingency. We would have to draw from capital reserves. I think the other potential option you may be thinking about is potentially raising rates to offset the revenue loss. That is, again, council's prerogative, but we are already on the higher end of the rates. We would be essentially raising rates to offset kind of these costs in these other areas, but that would be the only real other choice here.
Mr. Brenneman?
So my answer to Councillor Schwind's question would have been, basically, I think through both Mr. Boupé and recently Mr. Lynn's presentation, one of the last slides, I think, articulates, the fact that while I appreciate that, I think, part of your question is how do we deal with the financial? I think the actions that we need to do are the meeting with the region ASAP, with respect to the billing. Make the time in our schedule to meet with the region, to reconcile the billings, to see what we can find out there. Outside of that, as Mr. Poupé says, move forward, accelerate the, get going on the water meter replacement. Because I mean, at the end of the day, certainly I don't think I think we all recognize that we're not going to fix the current state of the financial situation without real actions. And so that involves finance meeting with finance at the region side. It involves infrastructure services meeting with their colleagues with respect to what some of the monitoring data shows and what discrepancies might exist. I think that's where we need to immediately concentrate our efforts is, some of the last slides you saw on the real tangible actions to try and reconcile where we currently sit. Because as Councillor Bryant points out, it seems natural we need to sit down with the region and say, those are too high discrepancies. We need to figure that out and try to drill down on what's going on there.
Councillor Bryant?
Just a quick comment. Councillor Schwint raised the issue of meter replacement. I had my meter replaced and I've noticed no difference in my billing. They were virtually the same as from months before. So we may not find a lot of savings in meter replacement, but at least we know they're running properly now.
Councillor Cadeau?
I don't know if Councillor Schwint wants to speak to the meter replacement piece. No? Okay. I have a couple questions. One's very specific, one's more general. So question to Ms. Armstrong, because I believe you've been the public facing staff member communicating the changes around water billing, and I could be mistaken, but if it is you, have you come across many issues in terms of the adjustments that are being made to those bills, like any trends or recurring issues that you've come across?
Through you, Chairman Burgess, to Councillor Cadeau. No, we haven't seen a lot. We've our big thing that we're finding is that missed meters with new builds or that kind of stuff, that we're catching up with those. There hasn't, as Councillor Bryant said, hopefully yours wasn't a really old meter, because we are hoping that we will see meters slowing down, and then to replace them, they will be more accurate. Yeah, we've actually been pretty good in the last few months, or for 2026 especially, that we are getting caught up and that we're not having huge backlog on billing. So I think we're in good shape that way. Previously, yeah, we had adjustments and figuring out if this meter was at this place, and we stumble across those one-offs all the time. But for the most part, we're pretty good at being accurate to the best of our knowledge anyways.
That's great news. And if I can, the more general question is a bit of a big one, and I don't assume that we're going to get an answer tonight, but I was wondering if the Director of Finance could run some analysis, and if you can, some comparators as well, of an overall tax rate that combines both property taxes and utilities, because I know that we are at the highest when we look at utilities, and then we're at the lowest when you look at our tax levy. And having conversations with residents, it's a little challenging to continue to say that we're the lowest tax rate across the region when we're the highest in utilities. So it'd be nice if we could combine those two numbers to see where we stand. I don't know if that's something that you could do or not.
Through you, Chair Burgess, that's definitely something we can look into. We started some of that work during the 2026 budget process, but it's definitely something that we could look into. And because it is good to know that how much the residents are paying related to some of this, because it's at the end of the day, it's one rate and taxpayer. It's the same person. So we shouldn't really differentiate between the taxes and the rates. Yep.
Councillor Schwint?
Thanks. I know we found some major discrepancies in billings in 2024, 25 and previous. Are there any identified that will affect the 2026 results?
Through you, Chair Burgess, none that we're aware of. Anything that we were aware of, we accrued in 2025. So there's no additional revenue that we know of that's going to come in one-time billing for these.
I just want to make sure that we've got a kind of a static state.
See no more questions. There is a recommended resolution basically to receive the staff report for information purposes. Does someone want to move that?
I'm just wondering when the next one will come.
Director Poupet?
Yeah, good question through you, Chair Burgess. So just looking at the council calendar, we have a clean month in July. What I would propose is if council's accepting of this, we could aim for the 15th of September. That would give us a couple of months to get some work completed and then some more analysis done, and we can see what the impacts of the capital program is. If that is too long and you want to see something in August, then it would be August 25th.
Councillor Schwint, you good with September?
I'm good with September. I just want to make sure we knew a date.
Guess we could add that to the motion to come back on September 15th. Someone like to move that? Councillor Bryant, Councillor Cadeau, second. Any other discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. All right, thank you. On to other business. The mayor's report on regional matters. I'll turn it over to Mayor Shantz.
Thanks. I'm just quickly going over the agendas from last week and the things that jumped out specifically for us, I would say, are both in the Sustainability, Infrastructure and Development Committee, and one is a report on airport growth. It's sort of an updated plan for the airport, and it still relies on reaching certain milestones in terms of number of passengers before the next phase, I guess, is put in. And the second is was the landfill, that there's 20 years of capacity left, so the region's starting to put a process in place to look at what happens next. Feels like when I first started that there was 20 years of capacity left, so we're doing well at at mitigating that, but at some point, we'll have to find something else. And then, of course, the piece we've already talked a little bit about is the water issue, and we're making progress. Way too slow for most people's liking, but we are making progress, and have now got at least an initial allocation for end of third quarter 2026. But there'll be more to come in the next couple weeks.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Any questions for her? Councillor Cadeau?
Thanks, Chair. Through you, I came across some media about region and a report coming forward to regional council about no right turns on red lights, and having experienced the one on Whippoorwill, it's terrible. And I just want to voice my staunch opposition to that for what it's worth.
Thank you. I think it's 4 intersections that they're doing it at, but I hear your concerns.
Are there any more in Woolwich, or are those?
They're all in the cities.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. On to council reports and updates. Does anyone have an update? See none. Any outstanding council activity list comments? Seeing none, then we'll go to items pulled from the information package. There was a resolution from the City of Waterloo, the Heritage Helping Housing Motion. Councillor Bryant has pulled this from the information package and has included it in the revised agenda package. This is a notice of motion, and members of council may ask questions for clarification, but debate and voting may not take place until the next meeting on June 23rd. Councillor Bryant, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you. Yeah, this was a motion put forward by the ACO, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. And what they would like to see happen is there's heritage buildings, I guess in some cases are sitting empty and unused, and they would like to see them repurposed for housing and other uses instead of seeing them torn down and basically filling up the landfills. So they've put a motion together at the City of Waterloo asking Doug Ford for support to repurpose these buildings. So that's what the resolution's all about. So if council could, I guess, read it and be prepared to vote on it at the next meeting, that would be appreciated. The ACO has asked that this be brought forward on their behalf.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And yeah, we can take a look at it till next council meeting to vote on it and discuss it. Any questions on that? All right, seeing none. I think that brings us to the end of our regular meeting of council. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's passed. On behalf of council, we thank all those who watched the meeting or those who took the time to participate today. Good night, everyone.